How do you stick with something longer than a month or a year or 2 years, maybe 3 years? Do you jump from job to job or from interest to interest or from passion to passion? To some extent, this is okay and there's a place for that, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. But sometimes you need to stick with something for a long period of time. Let's take a look at why this happens and what you can do about it if you really want to stick with something and it means a lot to you. First off, one big reason why we tend to jump around as INFJs is because we love to learn. And to a certain extent, we like to build up facility of something or expertise or even mastery. But our desire to learn, which comes from the way our mind is wired, you see, our minds are put together with what's called a function stack. Most people know about the preferences, which include introversion, intuition, feeling, and judging. But your mind is actually made up of 4 cognitive functions, which is also part of Myers-Briggs. And there's 4 mindsets. There's 8 altogether, but we have 4, and they're arranged in a hierarchy. And the first one is called introverted intuition. This is most important and influential. It's introverted and focused inwardly in nature, but it's also very creative. It sees patterns, it puts things together, and it loves learning. So those are a few aspects of it, but it's the biggest part of your personality. It's the driver, and it's what you do best. And often when you're alone, you get into the zone, and you can just be super productive when you're using this particular cognitive function, or what I like to call mindset. You have 3 others. The next one is extroverted nature, that helps you to look outwardly and interact with other people in a harmonious way. It's called extroverted feeling. And then the last 2 are introverted thinking and extroverted sensing, and they are progressively less influential, but every one of your mindsets plays an important role in your personality. The reason I share that with you is to point out that the biggest part of your personality is an aspect that loves to learn and to develop a skill. And usually you can do that in like 2 to 3 years, and then it's time to move on to something else because you've sucked all the marrow out of the bone, for a lack of a better analogy. You've really gotten the meat out of it, and you feel like it's time to move on to something new. And again, to some extent, that's okay. I just talked to somebody on a podcast, and he was explaining that he is a jack of all trades, and he used to hate that, but he's made peace with it to a certain extent, realizing that it's okay to be interested in a bunch of things. And I think actually this is what makes you a great counselor, because you have a bunch of different experiences and you have knowledge from a variety of areas of life that help you serve other people and connect with a host of people. So there are definite benefits to jumping around, and I'm not saying don't do it, but there are some times where you have a great idea or something you really care about and you want to stick with it for the long run. And this intuition makes you want to jump around. Well, in today's video, I'd like to give you a few suggestions for how you can stick with something for a longer period. My first suggestion is to incorporate change into the work you're doing or the project you're doing, or whatever it is you want to stick with, whenever and wherever possible. For example, I ride with an ENFP to work, mainly because I had to have knee surgery and I can't drive myself. But actually, it's been really good because we share a lot of commonalities. ENFPs and INFJs do. We both are dominant intuitives. The intuition is a little bit different, but the point is the same. We both love to collect information and to start something new. And this was true for this coworker of mine. So I was curious how he was able to stick with teaching for such a long time, because he's done it for a number of years. And I asked him about it, and he said, well, he has to move things around. He has to try something new, and he has to continue to reinvent lesson plans, to get creative, and to change things up. And that's what really fuels him. And I can relate to that 100%. There hasn't really been a year where I've gone back to the same lesson plan and thought, oh, this was a good one, I'm going to use that again. That'd be torture for me. Now, there are times and instances in life where you do need to reuse things, and I certainly reuse things from previous years, but I always like to tweak it and make it better, or overhaul it altogether, or try something new. And if I can bring in some kind of, for me, software or technology, or like some kind of music or something that I'm learning, and incorporate it into what I've already done to make it better, that energizes me. So I challenge you, in whatever you want to stick with, to try to change what you're doing and make it better or do it differently, because you can stick with something but incorporate some new kind of learning into it. The second thing that you can do to stick with something is to employ challenges. These show up in exercise and really all areas of life, but I got thinking about it when I thought about my Apple Watch. I don't know if you've used an Apple Watch or a similar tool, but often they give you an opportunity to do a challenge with a friend, and sometimes just a weekly challenge or a monthly challenge in a different format can get you to exercise more than maybe you would on your own. Now, for INFJs, I think we're pretty good at sticking to a routine. Not that we won't change it up, but we're pretty good at doing it on our own. I'm not speaking for all of us, but for many of us, that's the case. But for a lot of other people, I think Apple realizes, and other makers of Fitbit-like technology understand that people need challenges and they need others coming alongside them to do better in terms of reaching their exercise goals. So when you can mix things up and do a challenge, it'll help you stick with what you're doing for a long period of time. And again, that's incorporating that change that I mentioned before. Last night, my brother-in-law and I tried to do a challenge. I challenged him to take an hour and make a YouTube video, and I went off and did the same thing. And we just tried to do the best video we possibly could, because often when you're creating something, you get stuck into making it so perfect or so excellent that you don't do anything at all. You get stuck in perfect instead of realizing that done is better than perfect. So I said, take an hour, do the best you can, and then let's come back and share with each other, give each other feedback. And we did that, and it was really cool because he created something where he'd kind of been stalled for a while, and I did it as well, but I realized it energized me and it was really fun to try a different tactic or technique. So again, we're mixing things up, but the challenge can reinvigorate you and give you new life when you get stuck. Some of the best information that I ever learned when it came to sticking with something for a long period of time came from Michael Hyatt, and he was explaining that when you get lost and you don't really have a passion for something anymore, or you don't feel like doing it. And by the way, I would never use feelings to motivate you, at least not completely. I mean, they're symptomatic, but really you got to get down to the heart and the values. And of course you need to assess what's happening in the rest of life, but you have to get down to your heart and values. Don't always depend on feelings, because sometimes you just need more rest, or you need to get away for a break or whatnot. But he was explaining that a lot of people lose their way when they lose their why. And those are his words. So if you take the time before you ever get started, or even now, to really isolate your big why for what you're doing, that's going to motivate you to stick with it when you don't feel like sticking with it. And to take it a step further, he challenged people who are listening to the webinar that I watched to write it down. And honestly, I never bought the product that he was selling. Not that it wasn't a great product. I read his book, but he was challenging people to write it down, because putting it in writing and putting it on paper or doing it digitally is proven to help people take more action on what they're doing. So when you find that why and you put it down in writing and you keep coming back to it on a regular basis, I think I've heard other people say that you can even like tape it to the visor on your car, or someplace that you're going to look at it every day where you can review it. That's going to motivate you to stick with it for a long time. And if you keep coming back to the why, I'm not saying that the why won't be tweaked or changed at all, but if you have a big enough why, a big enough reason why, it'll really motivate you. For me, one of the whys for why I do this video is because it really energizes me to get creative and to help other people. I love making these sorts of videos. And even if I'm doing my other work that as a teacher that I've done for so many years for the rest of my life, I'll be okay with that as long as I can keep creating. I love that creating process. And also, it's exciting to grow personally, and this is a great opportunity to grow for me. So those are a few of my whys for why I do it. And your why will go even farther if you're doing something that you love to do and you could do for a long period of time without getting bored of it. It's called your no-end road, and it's a concept that I've heard from author John Meese. But the point is, there's probably something, or a combination of some things, like a gift stack. Like I've heard that from Graham Cochran. Usually it's not just one particular thing, but it's a mix of different interests and abilities that come together that really get you interested in something and capture your interest, because it's a unique combination of the things that you do well. But when you're getting into something that you could do for a long period of time, and again, maybe it employs a mix of your gifts, that's your no-end road. So if you connect something you love to do to your why, it's going to help you to do it longer. And I mentioned this in a previous video again, but Dr. Henry Cloud, in his book, 9 Things You Can Do to Succeed at Life and Love, or 9 Things People Do to Succeed in Life and Love, one of those two, he mentions that a big thing for people who stick with something for a long period of time is digging up what they've really loved to do, even from childhood. And maybe you haven't gotten it down to one particular thing, but again, what are the things that come together, where your gifts come together, that really capture your interest? If you can nail that down and connect that to your why, it's going to help you do something for a longer period of time. And the last suggestion I have for you, if you really want to stick with something, is to find other people to support you. That could be a friend, it could be a family member, it can be a counselor, it can be a coach, what have you. But find other people to help you do it, because you're not going to be able to learn if you don't go with other people, and you're not going to be able to persevere if you don't get other people to help you. And what I mean by learn, obviously you can learn without that, but you won't be able to continue to progress as far as you possibly could without other people pouring into you. I've definitely met with counselors as I've tried to figure out what makes me tick and what I've been wired to do. And I paid for coaching. I paid $3,000 for coaching at one point. And really, that was one of the best investments that I ever made. It was a crazy expense at the time, and I thought I was nuts, but I'm really glad I did it because I learned some phenomenal skills that really energized me and have helped me to serve a lot of people as a result. So I challenge you, you don't have to pay a coach, but find somebody else who can pour into you and help you grow. And actually, again, going back to Graham Cochran, you don't have to even pay a ton of money for a coach. Every book that you ever read is a coach. Steve Moore has written a short guide called Why Dead People Make the Best Mentors, which is a catchy title. But the point is, we can learn from the biographies and stories of other people who've gone before us, people who have their whole life laid out and who have taken everything they learned and boiled it down to the most important parts so that you can learn from it and you don't have to go through a whole lifetime to figure it out. It's an excellent way to learn. So I'd challenge you to read or at least to listen to audiobooks, to podcasts, to YouTube. And I'm probably preaching to the choir because you already do that, but continue to do that because those people will help you to grow. So I hope these ideas have helped you. It is a challenge to stick with something, but it's one that you can surmount, especially if your why is big enough. Are there other ways that you've learned to persevere when you don't feel like it or when you've lost the inspiration, but you know it's worth it and you got to keep going? I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you have other ideas? Share them in the comments below. And if you'd like to learn more about your INFJ personality, I'd love to give you a free copy of my book, The INFJ Personality Guide. In the book, you'll learn about the mindsets and motivations that cause you to do what you do, as well as hopefully come away with an understanding that you're not messed up or broken, but just different, and the world needs your gifts. You can grab a free copy of the book by going to infjbook.com. If you found the video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.